an original MCM production.
I'm going to introduce Rotarian and Milwaukee Art Museum Board of Director, Jill Pelisek, who will now introduce our speaker for today. Jill?
Thank you, President Nancy. In mid-August of this year, Dr. Marcelle Polednik joined the Milwaukee Art Museum. She is the first Donna and Donald Baumgartner director. She and her husband, Dr. David Kammerman, and their 4-year-old son, Beckett, live on the east side, and they've been having a wonderful time exploring their new home and city. Marcelle brings extensive experience to the Art Museum, so please join me in welcoming Dr. Marcelle Polednik.
Thank you very much, Jill, for that lovely introduction. I'm delighted to be here with you today to tell you a little bit more about the next chapter in the life of the Milwaukee Art Museum. So I wanted to start, since we're all still getting acquainted. As Jill mentioned, I arrived mid-August, and this is my first opportunity to speak with you all in this room. I thought I would share with you a little bit more about my background and then tell you what's ahead at the museum, which hopefully you will agree is going to be quite exciting. So I want to start with this lovely picture of me at the age of 5, which I bring out primarily as an homage to my grandmother, who I grew up with as a young child. This was staged after a wonderful photograph that she had taken at the same age. However, at this time, I was living in communist Czechoslovakia, and this was the haircut that was officially assigned to all the 5-year-olds. It worked better for some and less better for others. But I did grow up in Czechoslovakia. I was born in Poland. I came to this country at the age of 10, not speaking any English, but thanks to the Disney Channel, principally. Several months later, I emerged to speaking fluently, so something to be thankful for. Fortunately, I had several months before I needed to go to school when I arrived in the middle of the summer, and that gave me an edge, if you will. As you just heard, my education began, my more later education began at the University of Southern California, where I earned a BA in art history with honors. USC at this time, and this was a fascinating strategy, really started contemplating how to increase its scholarly intent as a university. And so it started a program called the Trustee Scholars, which was a 4-year all-expense-paid education, and really siphoned off a great number of students who would have gone to the Ivy Leagues, but who instead came to USC, worked as part of its honors college, really had mentors and tutors in the Oxford style of education, and did just that. So in the 10 years that this program was running more robustly, it really did increase the university's standing academically with regard to some of its peer institutions. I went from there to the Institute of Fine Arts, which is a little bit of a fiefdom within the New York University family. Unlike most of the NYU campus, which is downtown in Greenwich Village in Manhattan, the Institute of Fine Arts is located uptown, almost adjacent to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, in what was the Duke family mansion. So I like to say, and this is a true story, that for my qualifying exams for my PhD, I studied in what was Mrs. Duke's fur closet. And it was much larger than my New York apartment at the time, so that tells you a lot. My PhD is in contemporary art, but one of the things that I'm most proud of as a graduate of the Institute of Fine Arts is that the curriculum as a whole of the Institute is very object-focused. So we spent a lot of time really immersed in the life and study of works of art, not just how they were made and by whom, but also understanding how they changed over the course of their lifetime. So studying an object that was created in the 18th century also meant looking at the collections that it came in and out of, where it resided in the 21st century, how it was cared for, how had its materials changed, and how was it being interpreted as a result of those changes, which is quite a unique way to approach the study of art history, and one that has really influenced me as a curator and as a director from this point forward. I started my career working for a private collection in New York. The collection numbered 4,000 works of art, all contemporary. And it was situated between several residences, but the main residence was in Manhattan. And the position was very unique, I will say that. One of the things that I negotiated very early on was the arrival of a Joan Mitchell abstract expressionist triptych, which was about 18 feet wide, 10 feet high. And so in order to bring it into the residence, we had to stop traffic on Madison Avenue, have a crane involved, take out a window, all your usual things, right, that all of us deal with on a daily basis. But we would always joke with the family whenever there was a loan request that came from a museum to borrow this particular work of art, we would have a little chuckle, and I would describe to the director or the curator what was involved in the process of taking this work of art out of the residence. And sure enough, there was another Joan Mitchell that was equally good for the purposes of the exhibition that they could borrow from somewhere closer to home. So as I just alluded to, one of the things that was very exciting for me as a young curator or young art historian was the opportunity to really work with individuals who were deeply immersed in thinking about art as collectors, and who had longstanding relationships with key institutions around the country. And so whenever a curator or a director would call asking for a loan of a work of art, financial support for an exhibition, or even that pinnacle of experience, actually acquiring a work of art by donation for their collection, I was the person they would call. And I was the person who really made recommendations to the family about what to pursue and what not to pursue. So that was a very unique vantage point, and one that became particularly insightful when I transitioned to my first museum position at the Whitney Museum of American Art. Having had the experience of really looking at what drives collectors to think about philanthropy where museums are concerned, what creates the best possible environment for collaboration and communication between museum and collector, that was something that became very important to me as I was thinking about it from the other side of now working for a museum and working with collectors in our community. And about 2 years after I started working at the Whitney, I faced what I call sort of my proverbial fork in the road when it came to my professional opportunities. I could have chosen to stay at the Whitney and very slowly inch my way up the curatorial ladder, going from assistant curator to associate curator to full curator, maybe one day to chief curator, a process that would have probably taken 20 to 30 years. Or I could go to a smaller institution but have a deeper impact on the life of that organization and also gain not only important curatorial experience, but also important administrative experience as well. And so that is indeed what I chose to do. I went from the Whitney Museum to the Monterey Museum of Art in California, where the organization was really at a point of making some significant strides. In the community, the museum was best known for its collection of California plein air landscape paintings. And that collection, while incredibly important to the museum, represented about 3% of the total holdings of the museum, which included any number of important and noteworthy objects. F-64 straight photography, Asian antiquities, wonderful works on paper of the modernist tradition, including an Henri Matisse portfolio, you name it. There were a lot of incredible jewels in the collection. But because they had never been on view, the public was really under the impression, rightfully so, that California paintings was all that was to offer at the Monterey Museum of Art. So over the course of my 5.5 years there, we really charted a new course for building the collection, for letting the public know what was possible to see at the Monterey Museum of Art, and also creating a new approach to exhibitions, a new contemporary art program, and really a renewed interest in the community about what the museum had to offer and what it had the potential of becoming. From there, as Jill mentioned, I went on to MOCA Jacksonville to become its Director and Chief Curator. The 5.5 years that I spent in Jacksonville and at MOCA were truly a transformational moment in the life of the museum. And I wanted to share with you a few of the accomplishments of that era because they're particularly relevant to the kind of accomplishment that I think I can offer to the Milwaukee Art Museum. Our attendance grew by 70%, as you just heard. In that same 5-year period, our membership grew by 40%. Our school tours grew by 60%. Our virtual unique users to the website grew by 70%. And our contributed income also grew by 70%. And probably my proudest accomplishment, later on in my time at the museum, we garnered the largest donation ever given to a cultural nonprofit in Jacksonville's history. So as these numbers would indicate, we started as very much the underdog on the cultural scene. And then over the course of the 5.5 years, the museum really blossomed to a new position of responsibility, a new position of renown. And we really built not only the audience, but also the foundation of philanthropic interest that will steward the museum for the future, which is very exciting. Now, the way we accomplished it was really by focusing on one key hallmark: the integrity and the excellence of the artistic mission and vision of the museum. And that's what I want you to keep in mind as I now talk to you about the Milwaukee Art Museum. Now, MEM, of course, is on very firm footing. It's not the institution that MOCA was in 2011 when I inherited that organization. First and foremost, we have an astonishing permanent collection. And when I first came to the Milwaukee Art Museum as a candidate for my position, while I expected, and I was, astounded by the architecture of the museum, what I really fell in love with was the permanent collection, which is truly incredible. And I would argue it is really the gem and the jewel and the central protagonist of the next chapter in the life of the museum. That said, we also have an enviable museum campus. And I now use the word campus because post-renovation at the museum, we can proudly say that we're not only the work of one great architect, Calatrava, but also Saarinen and Daniel Kaler as well. I think that the renovation process, which we just celebrated the first anniversary of, really opened up opportunities for us to have more equilibrium when it came to the galleries and the presentation of works of art. And I'll talk about that in a little moment as well. We have financial viability as an institution. We've been grateful recipients of the largesse of the community. We have a strong endowment. We have a strong operating budget, and we have support from the community that allows us to have a financial platform for the years and the work ahead. We have also community renown and respect. So one of the things that I'm very excited about is whenever I meet someone, and even as a candidate for my position, when I would say that I was here to visit the museum, there was always this great smile that came across the face of whomever I was talking with, and the sense of pride in the museum and the pride of place that the museum holds in the life of this community. That, I think, is both a tremendous opportunity for the museum and also a position of great responsibility. We always want to live up to that sense of pride and ownership that we're cultivating with the citizens of Milwaukee and beyond. And we have tremendous staff and board talent and expertise. So we have these great ingredients. Everything seems to be in place. And now it's really time to think about the next chapter in the life of the museum. But before we do that, I wanted to share with you a little bit about the ins and outs of the organization. What are those key ingredients that drive our success? The Milwaukee Art Museum is really a little bit of a village, if you will. We have a total campus square footage of 360,000. We have an operating budget of $16 million a year. And we have an endowment of $60.5 million, which really consists of three different sub-areas. $40 million that we manage, about $7.5 million that's managed by other sources, including the Greater Milwaukee Foundation, for example, but for the benefit and the sole benefit of the museum. And we have $13 million in promised gifts that we know will come to benefit the endowment in the near future. We have a total staff of 211. 88 full-time staff members and 123 part-time staff members. So when I say village, I truly mean it. This is the size of a small village. And as you can see from this chart, we have a number of key departments within the organization that allow us to do the work of the museum. Everything from our curatorial department, which of course drives the entire artistic program, and in and of itself consists of the curators, the registrars, the conservators, and we also have, as you might expect, a strong development department, an education team, a facilities team that helps to maintain and care for the facilities that are part of our campus, a finance team. We run a wonderful food and beverage operation at the museum, which includes not only our restaurants, of which we have 3, but also all of the facility rentals and catering. As probably many of you in this room know, the museum does a very swift business when it comes to events, weddings in particular. We're one of the most photographed museums in the world, and there's good reason for that. We have a human resources department, IT, marketing and design, the museum store, security, and visitor experience. So this is a very subtle and a very complex operation, and each of those departments has a specific mandate. But my goal, of course, and part of my mandate as the director, is to bring all of them in greater unison and to ensure that we're all operating in lockstep with one another for the pursuit of the ultimate goal for the museum. Now, I wanted to pause for a moment on the renovation. How many of you have been to the museum post-renovation? Excellent. Okay. Those of you who haven't, please come. The experience of the permanent collection is so much improved through this project, and really it's allowed the museum to do so much more than it's ever been able to do before, and open up so many possibilities for us to think about as an institution that it truly is a transformational moment, much akin to the building of the Calatrava. As you can see, this is a wonderful view that you now have from the second floor of the Bradley Family Gallery balcony, if you will, overlooking the Calatrava building. I wanted to share a little bit about the process of the renovation with you. So you can see here part of what our exhibition design department does, which is part of our curatorial department, is for every exhibition, every project that the museum does, we create these scaled models that allow us to think about how the installations might work. So before we start moving physical works of art in the galleries, we already have a preliminary sense of where those objects might go. So these are the plans and the war room scenario, if you will, that was in place as the museum was preparing for the renovation. So every work of art that was going to be displayed was part of this model, and we were thinking about galleries, how to be able to install things most efficiently, and how to create the most wonderful sight lines and experiences for our visitors. The reinstalled galleries are really a thing of beauty. One of the things that we gained was a wonderful space to display our decorative arts collection. And so that's what you're seeing here as part of the renovated Kaler first floor. We also created these exceptional halls of contemporary art, 2 wonderful bays that allow you to walk, if you choose, temporally from the 1960s all the way through present day, or you can weave in and out of different time periods and look at the collection more thematically. Our European and Baroque art is now displayed together in the Saarinen building, again in wonderful spacious galleries that allow the works to really shine. And we have this sensational Hans Bertoya installation. All of these are kinetic sculptures that were created mid-century by the same artist. And one of the things that I'm working on with the team, they're meant to be activated. So you're allowed in most museums with the aid of a visitor services agent to actually activate the works. So for example, in the case of the silver cloche-like sculpture, if you put a pair of gloves on, you should be able to actually weave your hands in and out of the sculpture, which creates wonderful sound and a wonderful kinetic motion, if you will, among those works. So stay tuned. We're working on that at the museum. We also are the great beneficiaries of a number of important collections. The Leighton Art Collection, which was really the founding collection of the museum, is now installed together in a set of galleries that really pay tribute to how Frederick Leighton, the founder of what was this astounding collection in the 1880s, thought of the works and how he really wanted to see them installed together, salon style, if you will. Our American decorative arts are now interwoven with fine arts and paintings so that you have a richer sense of what the domestic interiors from which many of these paintings emerged, as well as the furnishings, what they would have looked like at the time. Instead of putting the paintings on one wall and the decorative arts in another section of the museum, we've really fused the experience in a way that allows visitors to have a richer understanding of that time period. And you're seeing here hauls from the Bradley collection, another important set of holdings at the museum that really allows us to tell the story of modern art moving into the mid-century, mid-20th century. We also have great holdings, as I know you all know, of Haitian art and folk art, and those were also all rethought and reinstalled as a part of this important project. So I've shared with you some of the look and feel of the galleries, but I think the other aspect of what makes it such a unique moment in the life of the museum post-renovation is that in all, we've added 25,000 square feet of galleries to our space. That's not insignificant, because it's allowed us to move from having 1,500 permanent collection objects on view to 2,500. So we've added 1,000 works of art on view, which is quite astonishing for a museum our scale. And in addition, we've added 2 temporary gallery spaces. So rather than having one central space in which we show featured exhibition, the Baker Rowland Gallery in the Calatrava building, we now have the benefit of the Bradley Family Gallery, which allows us to show more intimate scaled exhibitions. And we have the Hertzfeld Center for Photography and Media, which focuses just on our photography collection and our media holdings. So when I say this truly was a watershed moment in the life of the museum, it's not only because we have all this extra space that we can now use to exhibit works of art, but we now have a new thought process in place for how we think about exhibition design and our exhibition strategy as a museum. We no longer can think about our exhibitions as discrete chapters and hermetically sealed boxes of one exhibition following the next and the next. We now have to think about ways of creating continuity and creating narrative between our exhibition projects across time and also at any one moment in time. Because when you come to the museum today, you can see not one, but 3 major exhibitions at a time. And that's not to mention all of the permanent collection rotations that we also schedule every 3 months at the museum. So the year ahead, and by that I mean the year 2017, as you can imagine, the last few months have been all about, for me, gaining insight, really spending time with staff, trustees, and donors, and understanding the full landscape of the museum. But as we look ahead to 2017, I really see it as a transformational chapter in the life of the museum, an opportunity and a challenge to evolve as an institution. We are not the institution that we were in 2014. We're now a much larger museum. We now have a much larger mandate when it comes to our artistic program, and it's time to really think about how that artistic program can be fulfilled and how we can build on the legacy of excellence that the museum has to offer. So along those lines, the staff and I have spent the last several weeks thinking about what the key strategies might be that we need to deploy in the year 2017 to help us really reach that goal as an institution. The first will come as no surprise. We need to be thinking about our artistic vision and mission as an organization. And that means, again, thinking about the exhibition vision and plan. How do we tell the story of art as the Milwaukee Art Museum? How does every initiative that we create differ from what would have been done by another institution? How do we find our voice as the Milwaukee Art Museum? And how can we make sure that every exhibition we create is identifiable as a Milwaukee Art Museum project, whether it's shown here at the museum or whether it travels to a partner venue 3,000 to 20,000 miles away? How do we ensure that it still feels very much like part of our artistic program? Similarly, we need to be thinking about ways of activating and growing our permanent collection. And so I've challenged our curatorial team to start compiling a collecting priorities document for the museum. We have a very talented team of curators, all of whom is working within their respective area of the collection. But now it's time to start thinking about an institutional strategy for growing the museum, identifying opportunities for collection growth and refinement, and then prioritizing those as we think about the future. Of course, our educational initiatives are key and important as we think about developing our artistic vision and mission. And there, too, we offer a tremendous amount of educational programs, but as an institution, we're principally focused right now on K through 12 education. So the 2 target audiences that I think we have room to explore and enrich moving forward are adults, adult programming, and our youngest audiences, ages 0 to 5, and young families. And we know there are tremendous opportunities for us to really think about those 2 areas as well as to refine our K through 12 initiatives. Now, once we really identify that artistic vision and mission, and we're able to tell our story as a museum, the next step in this process is to really start thinking about a brand and marketing strategy. So I know that most of you are familiar with the fact that the museum is currently referred to lovingly as the Calatrava, right? I hear that a lot. I don't hear the Milwaukee Art Museum nearly as much as I hear it referred to as the Calatrava. So symbolically, I think that's very important. The Calatrava building is clearly an important icon in the life of the city and a very important facility for the Milwaukee Art Museum. But the next goal is to really translate that love and sense of pride that our community feels in the Calatrava to what that building was built to support, and that is the artistic program of the museum. So building engagement in the collection, really starting to build the idea that the Milwaukee Art Museum is a place that is holding works in public trust for the citizens of Milwaukee, that our collection is your collection, and that we want everyone who's part of the city to come and feel that sense of ownership and pride over the works of art that we display. That's really an essential part of our process of growth and maturation as an institution. To that end, we've been spending a lot of time marketing our exhibitions, but not a lot of time marketing the museum. And so the next part of this process is to really think about how do we tell the story of the Milwaukee Art Museum, particularly because there are so many exhibitions that we have to offer now. There's so many programs. There's something happening every single day that's new and unique at the museum. So the story we need to tell is one of the whole, not one of an individual part. We also need to think about the role that technology plays in the life of the museum moving forward. We have a website redesign in our future, but we also have opportunities to think about how we engage visitors, whether they're at the museum or virtually, in the life of the organization through technology. So that's part of our strategy for the year 2017. We also want to create a unique visitor experience in our community, and our facilities lend themselves beautifully to that idea. So we'll be thinking about what is the mission and vision for how we treat visitors at the museum and the experiences we have to offer. And clearly, we want to engage the community, not only the greater Milwaukee community, both by reaching more broadly and by thinking more deeply about how we talk to our visitors, but also by expanding the scope of our geographic sphere of influence. One of the beauties, to my mind, for example, of the fact that Chicago is not that far away is that we have great organizations that are already doing good work there. We don't have to be the Chicago Art Institute. We don't have to be the Museum of Contemporary Art Chicago. We can find our own voice, and once we do, and we really crystallize our mission and vision, we will be able to draw audiences from far and wide to take part in what we have to offer, because we will have a unique vantage point as an institution of our scale and our capacity. And one of the things that I'm very interested in for the museum, and I think thought leadership comes in many forms, whether you look at it as artistic vision, brand and marketing strategy, opportunities to be a thought leader in the realm of visitor experience, we are at the cusp of doing some exciting things that I do think will build the museum's reputation on the national scale and international scale as a thought leader in museum practice. And so I wanted to leave you with this, I think, important statement about where I hope the museum is going and where we should land in the next 10 years. Before I do, obviously, endowment growth is key. We have to build the sustainability for the program that we're in the middle of mounting. But the mission statement is as follows. In 10 years, the Milwaukee Art Museum will be an internationally recognized thought leader in the realm of artistic programming, museum practice, and community engagement. Those are really the hallmarks of all of the efforts that I described to you for the year 2017 and beyond. And I think we're perfectly poised. As I mentioned, we have all the right ingredients, we have the right staff, we have the right board in place, and we have tremendous opportunities to really leverage all of the great assets that we bring as an organization and to refine our scope in such a way that will be beneficial to this community and also beneficial to our community because of the reputation that we're growing in the field. So that's, in essence, the work that's underway at the museum. It's early stages. It's been about 100 days since I arrived at the museum. So some of what we're planning will indeed change and will organically shift as we move over the course of the next year and beyond. but it's what we have our sights set on as an institution, and there's tremendous momentum within the organization to start really thinking beyond bricks and mortar, which has been the museum's focus for the last 15 years, and recognizably and necessarily to really thinking again about the art, about education, and about our mission and our mandate in the community. Thank you very much for your attention. I appreciate it. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Yes? Thank you. So the question was regarding the future of the website and really how do we see the strategy for the website? Is it a place where you can see the collection in total, or is it really meant to be an enticement to come and see the collection at the museum? So to answer your question, at MOCA Jacksonville, one of the things that we really spent a lot of time thinking about is what the role of the website is for the museum. And there was a rebrand process that MOCA Jacksonville went through in the later half of my tenure at the museum. And the website redesign was really the crowning jewel of that process. We started thinking about the website as a brand publishing platform. So rather than thinking about it as the place where you only go to receive information about what you will see when you come to the museum, it was a way for us to talk about things that were behind the scenes. So we actually, the museum had a very strong and continues to have a very strong blog feature on that website that every member of the staff, trustees, artists who we worked with, all of them were contributors to that blog. The blog was really a nice opportunity for us to share things that were in process, that maybe were not exhibition related, the work that individual staff members were conducting, the point of view of artists who were working with the museum on a series of projects. And that blog was then repurposed. People were sharing it on social media. Sometimes it would be republished in the local newspaper. It was just incredible to see how far and wide it traveled. So I tend to think of our approach to the website as being really a way for us to tell the story of the museum, which means both. We want to provide richer access to our collection, but we also don't want to replace the experience of coming to the museum. So there is a subtlety and a nuance to how you work around that issue. At the same time, we know we have scholars from all across the globe who are interested in our collection, some of whom may indeed never come to the Milwaukee Art Museum, but for whom the virtual experience will be significant and will provide a way of engaging with the institution which otherwise they wouldn't have. So we're interested in thinking through some of those strategies and providing the museum opportunities to talk about things that maybe are not related to exhibitions that might be on view, but are a complement. So again, when we find that institutional voice will take on many guises. It will be visible in the experience that you have in the galleries or at the museum, but it will also be visible in a different way on the website. And that's part of what we're interested in really understanding and thinking about as a strategy for the museum. So certainly we need to provide greater access to the collection. We need to provide more information about our exhibitions so that you can actually read about the exhibitions before or after you come to the museum and learn more, because when you're at the museum, you want to look at the works of art. But you may have questions that arise through that experience, and we can provide more educational material on our website that you can access before or after you have your museum experience. So it's those kind of thought processes that I think are important and relevant to the work of the website and building the website. Yes? I'm just starting that process. Right now it's been, as you can imagine, it's been very intensive work that we've been engaged in at the museum. However, I've had a chance to meet a lot of the arts leaders in the community, both in terms of visual arts as well as performing arts, and really thinking through opportunities to collaborate in our community. I'm a huge proponent of collaboration, and that's something that I bring with me as a passion. I advocate for that very strongly. So I have not yet been to the Museum of Wisconsin Art, but I look forward to that. Thank you. Yes? Still a small percentage. So we have over 30,000 works of art in our collection at the museum, of which we're showing 2,500, as I mentioned, as part of the permanent collection display. And that's not unusual. We're actually showing a greater percentage of our permanent collection than many museums our size, if you can believe it or not. The number of works in the collection, because it's so large, many of the works are works on paper, And works on paper by museum standards need to rotate every 3 months or so. So even though that number of 2,500 objects that's on view stays the same, every 3 months we're rotating works in and out of view. And so if you look at it more holistically, every couple of years we actually go through showing a great number of that 30,000 works. Yes, we do have a deaccessioning program at the museum. Deaccessioning is a very labor-intensive and very thoughtful and judicious process, so it often takes 6 to 8 months before you can deaccession a work of art from the collection. There's a lot that goes into it. And you have to be very prudent, because we all understand as curators and as directors, our sight lines are limited, and we're public stewards for the museum. And so we have to really think about that long view of how significant and relevant is this work of art, not just today, but tomorrow and 30 to 100 years from now. So we do occasionally deaccession works of art. Principally, deaccessions may relate to maybe lesser quality objects, works of art that demand tremendous conservation beyond what we feel that the museum can provide. Sometimes there are areas of the collection where we don't have curatorial expertise, and so the likelihood that the work of art will be exhibited is minimal. We don't deaccession a great deal. It's only a handful of objects each year, but we do conserve the funds that are gained through the deaccessioning process for the sole benefit of augmenting the collection. So they're not funds that are then added to the bottom line or help. They don't support our general operating as an institution. They really help, again, provide resources to grow the collection in the future. Yes? It's a great question. So we are not what I would call a true encyclopedic museum, in that we don't have a department for each respective tradition and legacy beyond the Western. So part of what I think we need to think about is the next 5 years, really we need to focus on what we do now as an organization, make sure that we refine our collecting interests. And I think beyond that, as we think about the future of the museum, we need to think about opportunities such as may present themselves to grow the collection beyond the current program. I don't think we have the capacity to do that today. In order to do that, we would need to have a curatorial team that has expertise in that area. We would need to have gallery display space that we can devote to that particular subject. We would need to have acquisition funds. We would need to have community support. And a part of what really drives the opportunity for a museum like ours is thinking about what collections and what collecting interests the Milwaukee community has as a whole. And who are those groups of collectors who are going to help build the collection over time? Because acquisition funds are always limited. So there's a lot of thinking along the lines that you've just described, but I do think there are opportunities for us to think beyond our current spheres of influence. Yes, Joe. I would be delighted. I would be delighted. So I brought with me my colleague at the museum, Elizabeth Alsbeck, who is at the table right back there. And we've created a special membership offer for Rotarians. So if you join today at the family or dual level, which is an $85 membership, you will receive 2 free parking passes for the museum's heated underground garage, which I understand may be a factor in the coming months. So if you have an interest in joining the museum, and we certainly appreciate your support, please see Elizabeth and she would be happy to help you with that. I think you also have membership brochures at each of your tables for your benefit. And let me just say a huge and hearty thank you to all of you as members of the community and as Rotarians, because you're doing wonderful work and engaging the community in important conversations. And I truly feel that the museum is a part of that effort. I think our place in the community is not only to talk about art, but to talk about, provide a place for civil discourse and conversation in a way that only museums can at this moment in time. So I look forward to that. I look forward to future partnerships with all of you. And I thank you again for your attention.
An MCM production.